The gleaming lobby of Wilson Global's headquarters shimmered under the morning light, the kind that makes every polished surface and chrome fixture look like it belongs at a magazine spread. Executives in tailored suits drifted through the space, murmuring quietly about the mysterious merger proposal from Sterling Enterprises. The air buzzed with anticipation, a mix of excitement, arrogance, and the subtle scent of power. At the end of the mahogany conference table, Michael Wilson, my brother and the company's confident, self-assured CFO, was already holding court. His phone buzzed constantly, yet he barely looked up, a smirk perpetually on his face as if the success of this deal was guaranteed before it even began. Everyone around him hung on his every word, unaware that the game was about to shift dramatically. And me? I lingered by the coffee station, moving with deliberate calm, arranging cups, creamers, and spoons as I had for the past 3 years. My gray dress was simple, my makeup minimal, my presence almost non-existent. To the corporate elite around me, I was just Emma, the unremarkable executive assistant. Invisible. Easily overlooked. Emma, Michael called without looking up, a slight irritation in his tone. Make sure it's the premium roast this time. Sterling is finally showing up, and we can't serve them that cheap stuff you brought last week. I bit back a smile, if only he knew. That cheap coffee had been intentional. A small test to see who noticed, who cared about the people serving them. The results had been telling, and humiliating for all the arrogant men at that table. Yes, Mr. Wilson, I replied softly, keeping my tone professional as I began preparing the premium Brazilian roast imported from my private estate. Far superior to anything they expected. The room gradually filled with Wilson Global's top executives. My father, retired in title but still the chairman, took his usual place at the head of the table. His eyes flicked to Michael, pride radiating. From his posture, a silent pat on the shoulder for the son who he believed had saved the family company after the recession. Everyone ready? Dad asked, adjusting his tie. Sterling Enterprises is known for moving fast. Their CEO has a reputation for being aggressive in acquisitions. I held back a quiet laugh. Aggressive? They had no idea. Don't worry, Dad, Michael said confidently. I've gone over their financials. They need this merger more than we do. By lunch, they'll be signing on our terms. Poor Michael. He had no idea that every spreadsheet he'd studied, every financial report he'd praised, was carefully curated fiction. I had spent years behind the scenes, observing, understanding, and learning every hidden weakness in this company. Every misstep they thought was invisible, I had cataloged. Emma! Michael snapped his fingers, his voice cutting through the murmur of executives. Coffee service. And try not to spill it this time. I had not spilled a single drop in 3 years. But that story, his favorite anecdote from my very first day, had become a permanent stain on my record in their eyes. A harmless reminder of my supposed incompetence. They had no idea the hands that had trembled that day were now capable of controlling entire enterprises. The door opened, and Harrison Wright, Sterling's lead counsel, entered. His reputation preceded him, a ruthless, meticulous strategist. And yes, I had hired him myself, knowing exactly how I would play this hand. Good morning, he said, nodding at the room. He began distributing thick, confidential folders. Just on schedule. Michael's eyes flicked up. Where's your CEO? He demanded. We were told Sterling's owner would be here personally. They're here, Harrison replied casually, a hint of a smile on his lips. In fact, they've been here all along. My moment had arrived. I stepped forward from the coffee station, removing the plain glasses and apron that had concealed my true identity for so long. My voice rang out across the polished table, calm, authoritative, undeniable. Premium roast is ready, I announced. Silence fell. The kind of silence that stretches and thickens, making every second feel heavier than the last. Dad's head snapped up. Michael's confident smirk froze. What are you doing? Dad asked, confusion threading his voice. I leaned casually against the table, pointing toward the folders Harrison had distributed. Open the first page, you'll find it particularly enlightening. The executives flipped through the documents. Slowly, expressions morphed from mild confusion to absolute shock. This can't be right, Michael stammered, his hands shaking as he paged frantically. Sterling Enterprises, owned by Emma Wilson, I said, my smile calm, almost gentle. Dad's hands trembled as he read. But you've been working here as a secretary. Yes, I corrected him. I've been observing, learning, and understanding how this company truly operates. Every decision, every credit taken by others, every slight ignored, I've known it all. Michael's confidence dissolved. You disappeared after college. Went off to find yourself. What does this mean? I moved to the head of the table, my presence filling the room. I found myself. And I've been building Sterling Enterprises into one of the largest private equity firms in the country. While you were managing this company, I was creating real value. Faces went pale as Harrison spoke up, clarifying the ownership structure. Miss Wilson, legally Sterling, now controls 51% of Wilson Global's shares, acquired through various subsidiaries over the past year. I picked up a cup of the coffee I had prepared, taking a slow sip. Premium Brazilian roast, I said, casually, letting the irony sink in. Much better than the cheap stuff you accused me of serving last week, isn't it, Michael? The room descended into chaos. Board members scrambled, flipping pages, realizing the depth of the deception. Michael's face drained of color as he grasped the truth. The company he had thought he controlled was now under my authority. Notice? I asked, almost conversationally. When was the last time anyone checked the shareholder registry? Too busy congratulating yourselves to see who was really in control. Harrison pulled up a presentation on the screen, revealing the real numbers: Wilson Global's debt, hidden subsidiaries, offshore accounts, and misreported profits. Michael's confident veneer cracked completely. I stood tall. While you were ordering me to fetch coffee, I audited every aspect of this company. Every department, every report. Everyone who thought they were untouchable. I watched. Dad had aged in minutes, the weight of reality pressing down. Emma, why go to all this trouble? I smiled, calm, unwavering. Remember when I presented my restructuring plan 7 years ago? You laughed me out of the boardroom. Said I didn't understand real business. I stayed building Sterling into a company 10 times the size of Wilson Global, while you played. At corporate games, I was creating value that lasts. The first shocks of my revelation rippled outward. SEC investigators, forensic accountants, and a cadre of Sterling executives were poised, ready to act. Mismanagement, pension fund irregularities, and insider trading were now in the crosshairs. Michael tried to protest, pleading, shouting. I silenced him with calm authority. Not anymore. This is no longer your company. It's time to run it properly. The board listened, shocked and quiet. Change was coming. Justice, accountability, and respect, concepts long ignored, were finally being enforced. I raised my cup of coffee one final time. And from now on, everyone gets the same premium roast. In my companies, we respect every single person. Even the ones serving the coffee. Outside, the corporate world watched in stunned fascination. The secretary who secretly built a private equity empire had just taken control of one of the nation's largest firms. Headlines would call it a takeover, a scandal, a mystery. But it wasn't about revenge, it was about doing business the right way, finally, at last. And for me, it was just the beginning. Asterisk, the room that had just witnessed my revelation was now a powder keg. Wilson Global's executives, accustomed to unquestioned authority, shuffled papers nervously, murmuring under their breath. Every glance toward me carried a mix of disbelief, fear, and begrudging respect. Michael, once the unchallenged master of this boardroom, was now a man clinging to a crumbling throne. I let them stew in it. Let them feel the weight of the truth. It was a lesson they had all needed, but none had expected to learn from a secretary. Harrison Wright, ever professional, stepped forward, distributing the next set of documents with deliberate precision. These outline the immediate corporate governance changes, he announced. Michael Wilson is temporarily removed from his role as CFO, pending a full investigation into financial misconduct. Michael's face twisted in disbelief. You can't do this. I'm a Wilson. This is my company. I raised an eyebrow, letting my voice carry calm authority. Not anymore. Sterling Enterprises now holds the controlling stake, and unlike you, I know how to run a company properly. The tension was almost tactile. Board members glanced at each other, the invisible shield of loyalty to Michael shattered. Some whispered, others reached for their phones, likely calling lawyers to confirm the shocking reality. Michael, I continued, my tone measured. You gambled with the company's future, manipulated numbers, hid bosses, and now you face the consequences. This isn't personal, it's business. And in business, accountability matters. Dad, who had been silent for much of the chaos, finally spoke. His voice trembled, a mix of authority and helplessness. Emma, I don't understand why you've done this. Why not come to us first? I let a pause hang in the room, letting the weight of every word sink in. Because, Dad, you weren't listening. 7 years ago, I presented a plan to restructure Wilson Global properly. You laughed, you dismissed it. And every year since, I watched mistakes compound. Michael's protests grew louder. But we're family. You can't just take over like this. Family doesn't excuse incompetence, I shot back. Family doesn't allow you to jeopardize thousands of employees' futures. Family doesn't give you a free pass to hide debts and gamble with pensions. This is about protecting what matters. Including you, though you might not see it that way. The board shifted uncomfortably as Harrison pulled up another presentation. Graphs, charts, and financial statements filled the screen. Real numbers. Hidden liabilities. Offshore accounts. Creative accounting that had made Michael appear infallible. This, I said, pointing to the graphs, is the true state of Wilson Global. Debts triple what you've reported. Acquisitions funded through shell companies you thought no one would trace. Pension funds mismanaged, insider trading. And that's just the start. A hush fell over the room. Even the most senior executives, the ones who had spent decades navigating corporate politics, seemed stunned. They had assumed loyalty and family would protect them. But they hadn't accounted for me. Michael's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. This isn't possible. I've run this company. You ran it into the ground, I replied softly, almost mournfully. And now it's time to fix it. Dad's shoulders slumped. His decades of oversight, of trusting Michael implicitly, had failed him. Emma, all this, why stay after you left? Why return now? I leaned on the table, my gaze unwavering. Because someone had to save this company before it was too late. And because I had to show you that competence matters. More than connections, that respect is earned, not inherited, and that a name alone doesn't protect you from failure. The room's atmosphere was thick with tension. Michael's usual smugness had evaporated, replaced by panic and desperation. He scrambled, trying to reach the documents, trying to regain control. But the board had begun to pivot. No longer bound by loyalty to him, they were listening. They were seeing reality for the first time. Harrison handed me another folder, which I opened deliberately. Here are details on offshore accounts, unreported liabilities, and mismanaged funds. The SEC is prepared to act on these immediately. We have the evidence ready. Michael's face went pale. SEC, you can't. Yes, I can. And I will. The employees whose futures you gambled with deserve justice. The shareholders deserve transparency. And the company deserves to survive. Dad swallowed hard, realizing the enormity of the situation. Emma, this is severe. It's the consequences of ignoring warnings, I said, of prioritizing pride over responsibility, of thinking a title guarantees respect. The clock ticked in the background, almost deafening in its rhythm. Outside, the world was oblivious to the quiet revolution happening behind the conference room walls. But inside, history was being rewritten. Michael tried one last plea, his voice cracking. I can fix this. We can negotiate. Work it out. I held up a hand, firm, unyielding. No, too much has been ignored for too long. This isn't about punishment. It's about correction. You gambled with this company, and now your actions have consequences. That's the way the world works, Michael. The board members were murmuring now, some nodding subtly. The tide had shifted. Loyalty to Michael was gone. Respect, finally, was moving toward me. I took another measured sip of coffee, letting the aroma settle in the room. A small reminder of my unassuming disguise, and how much it had concealed. This company will survive. But under new leadership, proper leadership. Michael slumped in his chair, defeated, realizing that his confidence, his privilege, and his assumptions had all been illusions. The sister he had ignored, mocked, and underestimated had orchestrated the most comprehensive corporate coup in memory. Dad, finally regaining composure, looked at me with a mixture of awe, guilt, and resignation. You've saved it. I allowed myself a small, faint smile. I've done more than save it. I've set it on a path where the next generation of employees, shareholders, and leaders won't be at the mercy of arrogance or nepotism. Michael's protests became whispers. The board's whispers grew into discussions of restructuring, audits, and transparency. The damage had been exposed, but so had the potential for real recovery. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a calm satisfaction. Not vengeance, not cruelty, but a quiet, undeniable proof